So yesterday we talked about why authors in general need editors. And then I left you guys with a question: do I, James Ranson, need an editor? And that's the question I'm going to address tonight. Now, by the logic of last night's discussion, I am an author, therefore I need an editor. But I've also been a writer for almost 20 years. I've also been an editor for several years. I've worked on some books that have done very, very well, and most of my clients have been very happy with the editing I've done for them. So, given that skill set and that background, how much do I need an editor? That is a question that I honestly struggle to answer a little bit, because there's some ego tied up in that. And I think there are any writer in my situation or with my background or a background similar to mine can be tempted to feel like, yeah, I don't need an editor. I've been doing this forever. I know how it works. I know my writing is good. But is it really good? Is it great? Is it excellent? Is it good enough? I don't know. That's one of the reasons that authors should work with editors, simply because the author is too close to their own writing to know if it's as good as they think it is. I would like to think I don't need a lot of editing. I would like to think that my writing is solid and quality enough that any editor I work with wouldn't have a lot of changes to make or feedback to give me. But I could be wrong. I honestly don't know. So, am I going to work with an editor? Yes. I've been talking to a couple different ones that I know. When I started this project, I thought about going and putting up an ad on Upwork, because that's what a lot of first-time authors either are taught to do or just have to do because of their resources. I may or may not still do that. My recommendation for any author at any level when they're looking for an editor is to start with people they know. And if those include editors, great. If not, ask people for recommendations of editors they might know, because people are always going to give you better resources and better answers and better connections than people you don't know. Plus, I don't trust Upwork very much. They are a race to the bottom in price, which means the people who work on there most of the time are people who are willing to work for not very much money, which means they either have to take on a huge amount of work just to make ends meet, or they may not have English as their first language, or they may live in a much poorer country. And, is there a little bit of prejudice in that judgment? Yeah, probably. But I am an English-speaking writer. My audience is an English-speaking audience. I need an editor who's a native English speaker, he said. A native English speaker. There we go. A funny moment to trip over my tongue there. That's just something that needs to happen. So, I don't know if I'm going to actually post an ad on that site or a site like it. If the editors that I talk to in the next couple of days, if one of them comes through and we decide that's going to be a good fit, then I probably will just go with them. But if not, then I'll have to look elsewhere, and I think if I do still post the ad, it would probably just to see what happens, to see the kind of responses I get. So that could be a fun experiment, just to be like, yep, I was right. Or not. So we'll see. But there is part of me that thinks I don't need an editor. And I admit that. And I think the reason that I'm going with an editor anyway is partially because I know that I don't know that for sure. That's just my belief, the story in my mind. And also, one of my shortcuts that I write about in this book is the idea of thinking you know better. And if I think I know better than to hire an editor, I could be screwing myself over. I could be taking a shortcut that I don't even realize. Plus, since I am an editor and I say very, very often and very publicly that every author should work with an editor. If I don't, that is a little bit hypocritical. So it's actually a lot hypocritical. So I am going to work with one. And I'll let you know more about that as it develops. And I think tomorrow I'll talk a little bit about what the editing process tends to look like on my end. And as I start working with the editor, I can let you guys know what it starts to look like on their end. We'll go from there. All right, so hopefully that answered that question for you guys. I will see you guys tomorrow. Good night.